Am I on? There I am. Hey, so worship was so good, the groom decided to bow out up here. He's laying face down. He's like, I can't handle that. Matt was banging on the drums so hard he couldn't even stand on his own 2 feet. Hey, so I'm so glad you guys are here this week. If you've been here any of the last 3 weeks, you've heard about that 3-letter word we all love talking about in church. Starts with an S, ends with an X. Yes, that's right. We're talking about sex. Fun, isn't it? Well, Shua's been up here. He's been, mayor of Awkwardsville, USA, but I kicked him out, and I get to be the mayor this week. So welcome to Awkwardsville, USA, population us. But in all seriousness, this week we're going to talk about marriage. Shua's kind of brought us to this point. He's talked about sex and what God created it to be, and I'm going to talk about that one relationship that God created it to be expressed in. I'm a very lucky man. I'm married, and I have a beautiful wife. She's here tonight. Hi, Joy. Not to embarrass her, but Sam, if you could throw that picture up there. We got a picture of us on our wedding day there on the left, and then my brother's wedding this last summer in July. So in 6 years, I don't think we've changed much, maybe a little more tan this summer, but not much else. But anyway, our marriage is just great. You get to be married to your best friend. It's like an everyday slumber party. Like we go to bed together, wake up next to each other in the morning. Just have an adventure. It's just awesome. So tonight I want to talk to you guys about marriage, but I want to start with something that kind of breaks my heart, and that is, what does the world say about marriage? What does the world tell us about marriage? I think one of the things that bugs me the most is if you're watching TV and you see these commercials, and it's like, guys, brace yourselves, because once you get married, there's no more fun, right? Sell your fishing pole, sell your motorcycle. No more fun, no more crazy, no more wild rides. They even have a t-shirt design that says game over on it. Like that. Like, that poor fella. He looks so sad. He's like, oh, no more fun. I'm married now, no more fun. That's what the world's telling us, right? You get into marriage, it's this prison, and good luck getting out of that one, right? Or what about wives? What about the women? This one gets me a lot. You see these commercials, or you see TV shows, especially sitcoms. You see this in sitcoms a lot, where the husband comes home from work and he just kind of drags himself in the door. He plops down on the couch and he turns the TV on and he just sits there and like scratches his belly. He's like, honey, get me a beer. Turn on the game. He doesn't want to help her with the kids. He doesn't want to help make dinner or anything like that. And basically what it's saying is, okay, wives, when you step up to that altar and you see that 20, 25-year-old man standing across from you, he's basically a big baby in a grown man's body, and good luck raising that one, because he's going to be the hardest kid you ever raise. And that just is not what you should look forward to. I'm sorry, that's not what you should look forward to. What about this one, the boss? So say my buddy texts me, he goes, hey, we're going to watch the game on Friday night, you want to come over? And it's a simple reply, let me check with the boss. He's not talking about his employer. He's talking about his wife, right? Guess what? Spouse is not supposed to be your employer. You're not supposed to be an employee to your spouse. You're supposed to be a team together, 2 people becoming one, and not a slave to the other person. What about the old ball and chain? You guys have probably heard that one a lot, right? So that whole imprisonment, I get this shackle around my leg when I get married, and it's chained to my wife, and I just basically got to drag her through life like, oh, all her wants, all her needs, I got to carry that around with all my weight too? That's not what God says about marriage. That's what the world tells us about marriage. And I'd be up here lying if I said that marriage is easy, because it's not. Marriage is probably the hardest job you're ever going to have, but it's worth it. I mean, the statistics would show us, if we looked at it right now, statistics say that 50% of first marriages end in divorce. That's terrible. That means if everyone in here got married, at least half of you would end in divorce. You stand up in front of a congregation, maybe you just get married at the courthouse, and there's a few witnesses there, and you're making a commitment with that person, the people seated out in front of you, and God, that you're going to spend the rest of your life with that person. And 50% of the time, that doesn't make it. That's sad. That hurts me, and that hurts God, because that's not what he intended. So let's look at what God says about marriage. We're going to look at a few passages today that I think will give us a good picture of what he thinks about marriage. Proverbs 18:22. Find a good spouse, you find a good life. And even more, the favor of God. Now, what this verse isn't saying is that if you stay single the rest of your life, you're not going to have favor with God. I don't want you to read that and hear that, because that's not what it's saying. What it's saying is if you find a good spouse, somebody that can walk in step with you, that can complement you, and their strengths cover up your weaknesses and vice versa, you're going to have a good life. If you honor that person, you're going to have a good life, and God will show favor to that. Ephesians 5:25, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself up for her. This one's pretty prominent at wedding ceremonies, obviously. But if you read that verse really carefully, this is probably the highest calling a husband and wife can have. Now, the way it's worded, it says husbands love your wives. It doesn't say wives love your husbands. That's just kind of a given that wives should also repeat what the husband is doing. But what does that line mean when it says, just as Christ also loved the church? How much did Christ love the church? Well, he loved the church enough to come and die on a cross. He's not talking about the physical building, like we're sitting in a church right now, but this is just a building, guys. The church is us as believers, our bodies, our temples that the Holy Spirit lives in. He loved us so much that he died for us. He gave up all of his desires, all of his power to save us. The Bible's calling us as husbands and wives someday when you guys get married to love your spouse as much as he loves the church. That is a super high calling, super high. Not an easy one to make, but it's something to strive for, and it's a goal to fight for. I'm going to take us back to the first book of the Bible, Genesis. Shua kind of talked about this a couple weeks ago, where God puts Adam to sleep. He takes a rib out of him, wakes him up, and there's this naked woman standing in front of him. Her name is Eve. That is his wife. So Jesus is about to perform, or God is about to perform the first marriage in history, right? So Adam and Eve come together. He says, therefore, a man should leave his father and mother, and the two should become one. So two people becoming one, they're consummating their marriage with the act of lovemaking. The next verse says, and they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed. Now, naked is a funny word, right? Kind of makes you giggle a little bit. Oh, he said naked. He said naked. Naked, naked, naked. What is naked? What is naked? Naked is, I'm completely exposed. I am completely unashamed. I've got nothing to hide. You can see every bit of me. That's what naked is, right? There's no clothing. There's no barrier. You can see me. And what it's saying here is that the husband and wife were so comfortable together that they were unashamed. They could see their best. They could see their worst. We're not talking just about physical nakedness here. We're talking about emotional, spiritual. They are together, unashamed, and supporting each other. The next verse, Genesis chapter 3, verse 1, simply says this: now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field. I want us to look at those first three words. As soon as God sets up this marriage, he says, this is going to be good. I'm giving you this marriage. You are married to this other person. It's just the two of you. I'm commanding you to love one another and go from two people to one person. The devil's sitting there. He's like, I can't have that happen. That can't happen. Not on my time watch. I got to break that up. So the next verse, it's chapter 3, verse 1, but the chapters and verses weren't put in the Bible until later on. So this is the exact verse after it says that they were naked and unashamed. As soon as the devil sees something good, he's like, I got to stop that. I can't have that. I can't have that here. So he comes in and he tries to steal it and try to break that marriage up and try to, put in deceit there and say, well, that's going to be too powerful. If those two people come together, I've got to stop that. I've got to break that up. I want you to picture it this way. Picture an acorn. So an acorn is obviously a seed to an oak tree. Pretend that the acorn is the gift of sex. Now, it's kind of weird to think about it like that, but God gives us each the gift of our sexuality. He says, this is that acorn. I want you to plant this, and I want you to protect it, and I want you to let it grow. And someday, when you enter into a marriage relationship, the only relationship I created where I want this gift to be expressed, because you protected it your whole life, and you watered it, and you just fed it, and you kept it safe, it is now a mighty oak tree in your life. Now, if we picture Satan as a squirrel. Squirrels love acorns, don't they? So anything God gives us, I'm not talking just about the gift of sex, I'm not talking about marriage, I'm talking about any good thing that God gives us. The devil can't handle that. He's not for us, guys. He's totally against us. So he sees, okay, God's given them this gift of sex only for marriage. Well, I'm going to steal that acorn before it can ever grow into an oak tree. As long as I can steal it before it roots itself in the ground it's never going to turn into what God had planned for it. So we got to fight that squirrel, that crazy rabid squirrel of Satan. We got to protect that acorn that God has given us, that he wants to turn into a mighty oak. Now, I've got this cake up here, and obviously the groom was a little warm and he passed out earlier, but he's back standing now. So the goal of marriage, right, is a man and a woman on top of this cake, this wedding cake, and it's them and Jesus. Those are the three people that should be on the top tier of a cake. So what happens when a husband and a wife stop communicating, they stop taking their relationship seriously, and they let other things slip in there? The devil's going to see, hey, there's a little bit of a gap there. I'm going to start separating that even more. I'm going to separate you guys so far away from each other that there's room for something to come in between. So what kind of things can come between a husband and a wife? Someday when you get married, there's going to be things that are going to try to break you up. Because a marriage is one of the most powerful human relationships on the face of the earth, and the devil can't have that. He's going to fight for it. So maybe it's debt. Maybe you've got some debt when you get out of college someday. You bring that into your marriage. Guess what? Finances are a hard thing, and they split up a lot of marriages. Finances are one of the number one reasons people get divorced, because they can't communicate about how they should handle their finances. Maybe it's social media, right? Maybe it's your smartphone. I'll be honest, my wife and I have sat on the couch at home, 6 inches away from each other, both on our cell phones. Don't worry about the phone, guys. It's okay. I'm not concerned. What about that? My primary physical human relationship is sitting inches from me on my couch, and I'm more worried about my cell phone, what's on Facebook, what's on the internet, instead of investing in her and having a conversation with a human being right next to me. Social media can definitely get in between a marriage. Maybe it's a career. Maybe someday you get a job that you love a ton, and that's good. It's good to have a good job. But maybe that's like, oh, I got to go on this business trip every other week, and all of a sudden that becomes more important than my wife, and that's come between her and I as well. Maybe it's kids. Look at these cute little guys, huh? They're so little. Kids are an awesome blessing. They are. But if your primary relationship with your husband and wife takes second place to your parenting relationship, guess what? You're not going to be a good parent. Because if you're not invested in the person that's supposed to help you parent, you're not going to be able to parent those kids together. So they can get in between us. So now we've got these things separating the husband and wife. But that's not the only thing that will separate them. Maybe the husband feels, my wife doesn't pay attention to me anymore. All she's concerned about is the kids. She's running them to soccer practice and choir concerts, and I work hard all day long. And I get home, and all I want to do is sit on the couch and watch a little TV, and she just nags, right? I'm not talking about my relationship, by the way. It doesn't happen like that. What does he start to do? He starts to look for other avenues to get his wants and his needs met. So that's where Wonder Woman comes into the picture. And everything's bigger when you're a superhero, so she's very tall. She goes, oh, hey, big boy. I see your wife's not paying attention to you anymore. But guess what? I care about you. I'll listen to you. You want to vent about your wife and your family? Just come to me. I'll listen to you. All of a sudden, this relationship starts as emotional, right? I'm just spewing emotions. Then it turns physical. And all of a sudden, you're in a full-blown affair, and Wonder Woman's pulled the husband completely away from his wife. And because two can play that game, Superman flies in, and he goes, hey, girl, hey. Hey, girl, hey, I see your husband's off with Wonder Woman. Guess what? I got you. I'll listen to you. I'll take care of you. I'm Superman after all, right? I can meet all your needs. And again, starts off with conversation, turns to emotion, turns to physical things. All of a sudden, husband and wife aren't even on the same cake. They're with other people. So what do we have to do to get these things removed, right? Well, if you grow up someday and you have debt, you're going to have to talk that through with your spouse. It's a real thing. But communication and smart financial decisions can move this from between you and your spouse to the second tier of the cake. That's where it belongs. It doesn't belong up here between you two. Maybe it's social media. Oh, that looks good. Maybe it's social media. Social media has a place, a small one, yes, but not between you and your wife or your future spouse. So we move that down here. I'm just going to set it on the side. Maybe it's your career. You need money to live. I understand that. But if you're traveling so much for your job or you're spending so much time at the office that you forget that you have a spouse at home, that's not good. That needs to be moved down here. What about your kiddos? Again, huge blessing. Huge blessing. But if you make parenting your number one goal, you're going to forget the person you're supposed to parent with. And someday, hopefully, you're going to raise these kids and they're going to move out of your house so they're not living in your basement at 30 years old playing video games. Right? And their relationship with you is supposed to go on, but when you're at home with your spouse, that's the relationship that should be the most important. All right, now we come to Wonder Woman and Superman, right? These two, I don't think they belong anywhere up here. So, all of a sudden, husband and wife have regained their position. I've totally mutilated this cake. But they are now back together on the top tier of that cake, the only place that two people and Jesus should be. There shouldn't be anybody else up there with them. That is hard. It's not easy. It's not easy to just keep it you and your spouse and Jesus. It's so hard. Everything is pulling at you to say, no, that can wait. You can overbook your schedule. You can get so caught up in extracurricular activities, playing sports or whatever it is outside of your marriage, and you forget that that person at home loves you enough to commit the rest of their life to you. That's a pretty big commitment. So just a few things I want you guys to know about marriage. Marriage is a blast. I want you guys to look forward to marriage because it is fun. I said this before, but it's like living with your best friend, having a sleepover, but it truly is. And it's a human relationship that you cannot explain outside of being in a marriage. My wife and I have so many inside jokes that it's crazy. I mean, we can just finish each other's sandwiches. Hey, that's what I was going to say. Oh, I mean sentences, not sandwiches. You guys didn't catch that one. You're killing me. Okay. All right. But jokes aside, the other night I came home from work. All right, let's settle. Sorry, I got us off track. The other night I came home from work and I was a little frustrated. I didn't really feel like talking too much. I was just really angry. I just kind of wanted to vent, but I was kind of processing my emotions. So my wife and I decided to go for a walk. We live in an awesome neighborhood where we can just take like a 1.5 mile walk around our neighborhood. And we're walking along, and she's on my right. And we're just walking, side by side. And she reaches over. She just puts her hand in mine. She doesn't say anything. Just puts her hand in mine. We keep walking. We don't say anything for like 5 or 10 minutes. And it's not awkward. And finally she says, "We're going to get through this together." That's all she had to say. We're going to get through this together. And she was totally okay with me feeling the emotions that I was feeling. She was totally okay with me being frustrated and angry and just wanting to blow my top. But she just said, it's going to be okay and we're going to get through this together. That, in and of itself, to have a person that has seen you at your best and your worst. Believe me, my wife has seen me at my worst, and it's not pretty. But she's also seen me at my best, and I've seen her at her best and her worst. But what that does, guys, is it brings you closer together because that person has been so vulnerable. I've been so vulnerable, and yet she loves me with all her heart. And I love her with all my heart. That is something you have to fight for. My last call to you guys tonight, I got one more analogy, and I think it's a really good one. If you've been here around Jacob's Well for any amount of time, you've probably heard this one before. But I think it's just a great picture. So you guys know what draft horses are. They're like the big horses that pull the Budweiser wagon in the Super Bowl commercials. Those horses are huge. I mean, if I stood next to one, there's a picture up there, it's a little bit small, but if I stood next to one, I'm like up to their back. They're like 6 feet tall at the back. They're ridiculous. But anyway, you take 2 draft horses, so go in your imagination station with me here. One horse is the husband, one horse is the wife. Each one separate can pull 8,000 pounds by themselves. It's quite a bit of weight. Now, if we did some simple math and we said horse 1 and horse 2 got married, 8 plus 8 to me is 16. That's how I learned it in math anyway. You would think that 2 horses together could pull 16,000 pounds. Actually, we would be wrong. They can pull 24,000 pounds. So each one separate can pull 8. Together, they can pull 3 times as much. Now, if you take those 2 draft horses and you train them together, they learn each other's strengths and weaknesses. Maybe one's got a little bit of a weak left hoof, so the other one compensates when they take that step. All of a sudden, they can pull 32,000 pounds together. So one horse by himself, 8,000. Together, trained with another horse, 4 times as much, 32,000 pounds. Now, I'm not saying that you have to grow up someday and get married just so you can be more productive. That's not what I'm saying. You should be productive outside of marriage. But what I'm saying is if you get 2 people that are fully committed to each other, they bring their strengths and weaknesses both alike. They bring them together. They train together. They get in step with each other. All of a sudden, they're this fluid machine, and they can push through just about anything. And they carry each other because if one is going down, guess what? The other one's pulling. And just like Hannah mentioned before in her testimony, 2 people are stronger than one. And especially when they love each other and they're committed to each other. And I think that's just a great analogy to kind of finish up this message. So my next step for you guys, and I really want this to be something that you kind of ruminate on and take home with you. I want to call our guys in the room. I want you guys to think of yourselves as modern day knights. Her knight in shining armor. I want you to think of your future spouse, and I want you to think of yourself as her knight. And what does that mean? What does being a knight mean? That means honor and integrity, and you have to fight for what you want, right? Fight for the good. So I want you to fight for your own purity and your own integrity. And guess what? If something happens and you mess it up, God's got you. Jesus will forgive you, and you can keep fighting. But I want you to fight for your own heart, to keep that pure for your future spouse. I also want you to fight for your future spouse. They may be in this room, they may not. They may be halfway across the world, I don't know. But I want you to start earnestly thinking about them and praying for them, that they would keep their heart pure for you someday in marriage. And girls, I want you to fully embrace the princess concept. I want you guys to be princess. What I mean by that is protect yourself from that fire-breathing dragon that's out there trying to get you, right? The devil's out there, he's trying to put things in your path, things in your way that are going to stumble you up, make you fall. And when that night comes to save you and you're not pure anymore, I don't want that to happen to you. I want you to save yourself for your future spouse. Thanks for hanging out with us the last 4 weeks that we talked through this. I'm going to invite the worship team to come out. They're going to finish up in a song. And as I pray, I'm just going to pray for us, similar to Hannah did. And I just want you guys to really take this seriously, that you can make decisions right now in your life that will affect your future marriage someday. Would you please pray with me? Dear Lord, thank you for tonight. Just the power of worship and the power of testimony. And just the fact that you've given us a relationship on this earth that is as close to a relationship with you as we can get. A physical relationship that is supposed to model your relationship with your church. How much you love us. That you would go to the cross and die for our sins. I just pray that for all of us in this room right now, those that are married, those students that are looking forward to high school, that are looking forward to college, that someday may get married, I just pray right now, Lord, that they would start making decisions that would protect their hearts, protect their integrity for their future spouse, so they'd be able to walk into that marriage and say, I have kept myself for you. I'm giving all of me to you for the rest of my life, and I'm going to be unashamed. We're going to grow closer together and closer to Jesus together. Thank you for this time. In your holy name, amen.